Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Jan Roller, President of the City Club's Board of Trustees. Well, I guess it's official. With President Barack Obama's appointment on April 18th of today's guest, Aneesh Chopra, as America's first Chief Technology Officer, it can definitely be said that we are living in the age of technology. Many wondered whether candidate Obama would fulfill his campaign promise to create such a White House advisor. In making the announcement, the president said, Mr. Chopra will promote technological innovation to help achieve our most urgent priorities, from creating jobs and reducing healthcare costs to keeping our nation secure. Mr. Chopra's selection should not be surprising, since he has deep experience in three key tech priorities of the Obama administration: broadband, healthcare technology, and government efficiency. Before joining the administration, Mr. Chopra served as Virginia's Secretary of Technology under Governor Tim Kaine. Virginia has been one of the leading, if not the leading state, when it comes to helping deploy high-speed internet service. While in Virginia, Mr. Chopra made it a goal of the state to provide every business in the Commonwealth with broadband technology. Before serving in Governor Kaine's cabinet, Mr. Chopra was managing director of the Advisory Board Company, a publicly traded healthcare think tank serving nearly 2,500 hospitals and health systems. He graduated with a BA in public health from the Johns Hopkins University in 1994 and received a master's degree in public policy from Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government in 1997. Mr. Chopra's appointment has been met with great enthusiasm. One fan stated, Aneesh Chopra's a rock star. He's a brilliant, thoughtful change maker. He knows technology, he knows government, and he knows how to put the two together to solve real problems. We couldn't do better. Please welcome our Federal Chief Technology Officer, Aneesh Chopra.
Very kind introduction. I appreciate that very much, and thank you for the invitation to this very important and auspicious organization. It's a real honor to be here. It's an honor to be here in part because a mentor to me and thousands of others in the greater Washington area really have to thank Mario Marino for his leadership to bring out that spirit of entrepreneurship, and I know that he has that same spirit here in the Cleveland community, so we have a connection. I'm honored to be here because I share a professional relationship with Dr. Harris, who joins me in the President's Health Information Technology Strategy effort. We both serve on the President's standards body. And I'm also thankful that Lev is here. Lev Gonik had been an advisor to us during the transition team on thinking through a strategy for broadband as we related to the stimulus package and other activities. And then on a very personal note, dear friends of mine for over a decade, Subodh Chandra and Beju Shah, sitting here at the front to join in, gives me a chance to feel like family again. So while I am not of Cleveland, I hope that today I can be a sense of the member of the community at large. I wanted to begin my remarks today with just a little bit of a personal context. I have been appointed since April, but I was living in Richmond with my wife and my two children, a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old. And I had to basically move to Washington with a relatively short period of time to make the transition. So I had to commute, basically lived in Washington for 5 days and would try to come home to be a good father and a good husband. At the time, I got more acquainted with my communications devices. My wife and I previously would maybe send email every now and again, but obviously talk more on the phone. But because we were at a distance, my wife would take pictures of our kids and email them to me. When we moved to Washington about maybe 2 weeks ago, we went shopping in one of the retail stores, and I really wasn't keen to spend a lot of time shopping. We had to buy washers and dryers and things for the new home. I was in a store that honored pricing if it was available through matching services. So I went online on my device, called up a service that found better pricing and saved 30% on the device without having to shop store to store to store. I say that because we're in a very unique moment in our nation's history. We are consuming data at an incredible clip. The average person consumes about 1 gigabit of data every month. By 2013, that will go up 5-fold. We will be consuming 5 gigabits of data, and that's just based on what we know today, mostly video traffic and other capabilities. When we think about the way in which technology and innovation has had an impact, it's not just buying the PC. It's in almost every action we take. One of the folks I met with at the reception helps to digitize images. So when we get wedding portraits done, it's not just an analog relationship anymore. We have a digital connection. In almost every aspect of our lives, we had seen this migration or this transition to a digital world. When President Obama was a candidate, he acknowledged that this was starting to have an impact in public policy. You see, in traditional public policy, you would have various categories: health policy, education policy, and yes, we've had technology policy, what I would refer to as a box unto itself. And you'd have folks communicate and share their ideas about what that meant. But it didn't translate well in the world in which we live. We cannot talk about healthcare without understanding the impact of technology and innovation. Ditto energy, ditto education. And so the president suggested that to some degree, we as a community had to decide, would we keep technology a box unto itself, or would we find a way to bring it across a wide range of priorities? And it is in that context that I serve as our Chief Technology Officer. My primary mission and duty is to harness the power and potential of technology and innovation to help transform our nation's economy. And the president has asked that in this context, we sit right in the heart of all policymaking at the White House. That is the Domestic Policy Council, our Economic Council, on almost a wide range, even the National Security Council, with our emerging threats in the cybersecurity space. I share this with you because we are also coming at a time when our country's competitiveness is of great concern. We have been number one on almost every indicator for many, many years. The World Economic Forum ranks on global competitiveness. And for many years, America has either been number one, or we had one blip that was driven by anomalies in certain data sets. But historically, we've been ranked at the top. And a report in January of 2009, just released about 5 or 6 months ago, by the ITIF, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, similarly showed that we were reasonably strong on about 25 indicators of global competitiveness. So our static snapshot remained strong. But he decided to do one other twist on the data, a twist that really put into context the challenges before us. This is Rob Atkinson's report, for those that follow Dr. Atkinson. What Rob Atkinson's team had done was to benchmark 40 countries on these 25 measures. And he ranked them static, as I described, but he also decided to go back 5 years and to measure the pace of change on those indicators to get a sense for where we're going. And as he looked at these 25 indicators, and he aggregated the data into an index, amongst the 40 countries all over the world, anybody care to guess where the United States ranked on its rate of change? Yes, sir, 40th. We were dead last in the rate of change. Now, we could argue whether that means much, or is that, a bit exceptionalism, if you will, some data that can be presented in a format that is meant to call us to action. But if you drill into that set of metrics, the one that keeps us up at night, and if you ask the president as to where we think the future is, just to give you an example of one, the metric that's got us concerned is our higher education attainment rate. When you think about competitiveness, at the end of the day, it's about our workforce and the skills and the capacities of our workforce. And for the most part, we have largely been flat in the rate of our adults who have a 2- or 4-year degree. In the period of time in which we had been number one for decades, we've now seen in the most recent benchmarks, 8 countries have now surpassed us in the rate of their workforce that has a college degree. And if you look at the graphic and you sort of project it up, several more are right to follow. The president has said that by the year 2020, America shall once again have the #1 higher educational attainment rate in the world. But it will take us a great deal of effort, focus, and attention. We could have a similar discussion about the 24 other indicators. We're not all in concern. These are areas in which we should pay attention. But we also celebrate some of the positive aspects of where we are as an economy. In America, our NASDAQ markets, our venture capital markets, while we see a bit of a correction in the market, we remain the global source of capital. 60–70% of the global market share for IPOs happens in the United States. Even now, we're starting to see a thaw in the IPO market for venture-backed companies. We've had now 4 largely technology-based venture-backed companies make it out in just the last 2 or 3 months, which hopefully gives us a sign that we'll start to see more capital flowing to our entrepreneurial communities. So we have this sort of challenging environment. We have this realization that we are relatively strong on certain indicators, but we have a global market that's putting us in a position of competitive concern. We have a new administration grappling with a number of priorities, all having to get done with a high degree of excellence. And underlying all of them is an assumption of what the world is as we know it. I want to share with you what I believe are the key pillars of how we as a nation can help to address this challenge of our global competitiveness and to come out of this period stronger and, frankly, in a position for growth for our children and grandchildren. Allow me to give you the broad strokes as to how we think about these challenges. As an advisor to the president, I share this long-term view about what are the right policies we need to put into place. Call that the policy innovation portfolio. That is, we have to make the right judgments on infrastructure, on workforce, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But I'm equally mindful that we need to make investments, whether it be financial investments or leadership commitments, to show progress against those long-term goals in much shorter cycles. What will happen 90 days from today or 6 months from today? How will the world be better than it is along these pillars that we'll describe? So I find myself essentially governing these 2 portfolios, a focus on the right set of policies, but a commitment to stay grounded in what can be done in the short run. I want to share that framework across the areas that are critical in my view, and then pull up and reflect on what that means for communities like one here in Cleveland. When we think about in this construct, I am focused on 3 main things. First, bringing game-changing innovation to our president's key priorities on healthcare, energy, education, and of course, economic growth. Second, I am focused on ensuring that we have a robust 21st century infrastructure, smart and secure. That means putting in place the right strategies for broadband deployment, thinking about other infrastructure like our transportation infrastructure, which we're working on a program called NextGen to make sure that our air traffic system is modernized, whether it be our energy grid, which is to get our power organization a little bit more in line with the network model, and as well to think about the cybersecurity aspects of all of these dimensions. As Dr. Harris works to bring more and more of our healthcare information into a digital context, it will inform better decision-making amongst your clinicians, as well as your own, hopefully, familiar behaviors. But at the same time, we want to make sure that as that information that today resides in analog paper format, that it is secure and has earned your trust. So the president has asked that we think of this challenge of cybersecurity in much the same way as we do our opportunities for growth. For many, this is an either-or proposition. Either we put in place rules to really crack down on the risks, the cyber threats that we face, and therefore stifle economic growth, or we have an unfettered infrastructure the way that we've had it for the last decade and to spur economic growth. The president sees this as a false choice. We must find a way to do both, and I look forward to engaging on how we think about that challenge. The third, and perhaps most interesting aspect of all of this, is how we bring the principles of innovation and technology into the operations of government itself, what I would refer to as eating our own dog food. If we want communities to embrace the spirit of innovation, if we ask our healthcare providers to change, our schools, our power companies, our communities, it would be a shame if we hadn't injected that same spirit into the work that we do. And believe me, there is a wee bit of opportunity to bring openness and innovation into the public sector. I'm going to share, broadly speaking, across those dimensions where I see opportunity, and then I'm going to circle back and end with some closing remarks on why I think this is all relevant in the context of a local community. In general, I see three pillars of opportunity within all that I've described, especially in that beginning category of bringing game-changing innovation to presidential priorities. Traditional government intervention has been as follows. We invest in basic research and development, or we buy lots of stuff. We spend $70 billion a year on IT, just as an example. We buy lots of stuff. The question mark is to think about game-changing innovation. How do we occupy the gray area in the middle? Those are where I see three levers of opportunity. Number one, for those of us that have a research and development focus, one of my mentors, Mario, like yourself, a mentor by the name of Desh Deshpande, has made it very simple for me to think about this formula. He said, innovation is a function of ideas and relevance. Our nation has a tremendous capacity for idea generation. The challenge for us, especially in these areas like education, healthcare, energy, and the economy, is to bring up the concept of relevance. The marriage of the two will give us the chance to deliver tremendous change. So when we think about our research and development activities, I am working to siphon off a modest amount of our research activity, which is, by the way, a $150 billion enterprise, to find ways in which we can bring that kind of R&D spirit with relevance. So in healthcare, my good friend Dr. Harris is going to have a strategy for what he wants to see done, but collectively as a country, we're going to listen to our physicians and our caregivers and others, and they're going to help us understand relevance. And so we've got to find a way to bring some of those ideas to relevance and try to fund some of those proofs of concept, if you will. We've also got to be creative on the other extreme, which is instead of just buying stuff, normally the way we buy stuff is we wait for it to be really mature. Some call it, last year's model, or frankly, last decade's model would be a lot of what we end up buying because we started the procurement process around the time when that was considered cutting edge. We have to understand that we have opportunities to bring that kind of procurement light, if you will, or innovation procurement to address real-time needs. Today, if you visit the President's Open Government Initiative website, whitehouse.gov/open, you'll see a case study of defensesolutions.gov. One of my favorite little stories. Defensesolutions.gov is a modest little website where they would offer $300,000 grants for folks who can come up with concepts that would address long-standing challenges. So they have one on the website right now, which I refer to as CSI Baghdad, which is basically how do we get forensics that's more ruggedized into environments of conflict. And so they have a concept paper of what they're looking for, and you only have to write a 1 or 2 page response, and they have the authority to work with the best ideas that cull out of this process and to see them prototyped. So you see we have opportunities to move the R&D piece up just a notch against presidential priorities, and to think about creative ways to procure services that we need to advance our mission. And then in the middle is the biggest opportunity of them all. And that is to ensure that we have a platform of innovation in key sectors of our economy, one that brings the rules into the game so we can say the following. If we set the standards of communication, whether it be in the smart grid, whether it be in our healthcare system, whether it be in our school systems, if we set the rules as to what the standards are for how we exchange information, might we spur tremendous opportunity and economic growth from areas that we hadn't seen before. One of the startups that has me interested is Wolfram Alpha, which is the hot new Silicon Valley startup. and was chatting with the Wolfram team, and they consume data in an open format from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on caloric counts and agricultural information. And just as an example, they said, hey, Aneesh, don't tell my wife if she's watching the podcast, occasionally I'll have a Big Mac and fries. Type in Big Mac and fries in the search engine. And their capability is to pull the data that's publicly available in an open format, and they produce that little, that nice tag you see in the supermarket, which is the nutritional label, but it tells you a combination of information that is data from the Big Mac and the fry, so you see what the full package looks like when you consume it. This little app, consumable because we've got the data in an open format. So these principles of R&D, of open data standards, and of innovation in our procurement process are just some examples of how we think we're going to make a difference. I want to briefly touch on the notion of broadband and then relate that to our principles of open government, because these are all very related. When we see communities, in my experience in Virginia, very few investments have the potential for community transformation. Very few. I mean, we could try to make, you go back in history, what's the big bang we want to solve for transforming a certain community? It's not easy to find. But in the case of broadband, we've started to see examples of this starting to have an opportunity. I want to just share the story of Lebanon, Virginia, which is a community, part of our southwest area, largely a coal community, natural gas community, struggling from an economy that has had a hard time from a globalization standpoint. And frankly, very hard historically to say, hey, let's put up a big factory here because, geez, they're coming up all over the place. We're not finding that kind of, those are not the easiest opportunities. But they made an investment decision many years ago, and they said, what we're going to do as a community, much like what you've done here in Cleveland, is to take our tobacco settlement money and to put that into infrastructure in the 21st century. Put in high-capacity broadband lines, and all of a sudden, companies who could locate anywhere in the world could start to make decisions, say, if I located here, I could be just as connected to Cleveland or to Europe or to Asia because I'm sitting in Lebanon, but it wouldn't matter because I have that level of connectivity. And sure enough, 700 technology jobs attracted to the Lebanon community within several years of this infrastructure in the community. And it's transformed the way they think. I had the chance to visit Lebanon. There are a reasonable number of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent there, and I asked them how the life is like, and they said, geez, Aneesh, can you bring an Indian grocery store to the community? That would be particularly helpful. But it's really transformed. The first African-American woman was elected to city council, employed by one of the technology firms in that community's history. But I want to end with just a few words about a broader sense of where we are. Virginia, where I come from, is a commonwealth. It is not a state. When I lived in Arlington, which is on the D.C. border, I wouldn't know the difference. D.C. wanted to be a state, Maryland was, we were a commonwealth, couldn't really tell the difference. But we celebrated the 400th anniversary of the birthplace of Jamestown in 2007, and we had the Queen visiting. It gave our governor, Tim Kaine, the chance to remark on what it meant to be a commonwealth. And I think we've lost this notion in our public space. The notion is that we sometimes come together formally through the passing of laws, but more often than not, we come together as community, as neighbors, figuring out how we can make the park cleaner and safer, figuring out ways in which we can bring infrastructure to the community that we can't otherwise afford, knocking on Case Western's door to say, would you put up a wireless tower so you can beam into my neighborhood? That's the spirit of Commonwealth that we have seen all across America. What's so powerful about the capabilities of technology and innovation is it allows us to return to that spirit of Commonwealth in ways that traditional public policy may not succeed. And I want to just share with you but one example of how to think of this challenge, because I have to end in an acknowledgement of the reality of our world, which is we are in an economic challenging time. Jobs are not the easiest to come across these days. But I just want to share with you one example of spirit of Commonwealth. How many jobs do you think are currently available in the American economy? Anybody want to guess? We have 3 million posted vacant jobs. 3 million. I would guess, Dr. Harris, that the Cleveland Clinic has a reasonable number of openings. We have segments of our economy that are growing. What's powerful about broadband and this notion of spirit of Commonwealth is you could ask the following question. Could we mine all 3 million of those jobs, or more to the point, in the greater Cleveland area, and ask ourselves how many of those have to be done right physically here? When we think about this notion of Commonwealth, there are communities not far away, Youngstown, further away. I learned today about Mansfield. Communities that are adjacent to us where they're suffering. They're our friends and neighbors too. And we would hope that there's going to be economic growth and transformation, and we look to see who will take those factories and to turn them into productive assets once more. But in the here and the now, in the spirit of Commonwealth, how many of our vacant positions that we're having a hard time to fill could be surfaced in a community that's been hard hit? How many medical coding jobs, Dr. Harris, where you need maybe 6 or 7 months of community college training, could we repurpose in a town to provide access to jobs that have a reasonable wage in ways that we hadn't seen? We could look at these examples across any question we grapple with today. And that notion of what we do in the next 90 days or 6 months, which keeps me grounded about the opportunities for innovation. We can do that if we think of it in the context of spirit of Commonwealth. I witnessed this firsthand this morning when Lev took me around Cleveland to show me examples of how folks in the community are working together to try new ideas. Now, some of them could scale up with government investment, with applications to programs and funding and so forth, but they're small concepts that are being prototyped in the spirit of Commonwealth. We saw a Cleveland Clinic doctor talking to a patient to make sure that her diabetes was under control. All HIPAA compliant. We were making sure we were safe to figure out that discussion. The energy grid, we learned about opportunities for folks to consume information about whether they should do laundry at 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock because we'll avoid peak load and keep the systems running well. Those questions, those opportunities are going to come before us. You will ask me for advice or support on policy guidance. What should be in our budgets? What should we do in laws? How should we promote technology policy writ large? But you will also come to me and say, help me accelerate our community's spirit of Commonwealth. That latter phone call, I can't wait to take. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, you can take a seat again, and because I have a few announcements. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to Aneesh Chopra, Federal Chief Technology Officer for the Office of Science and Technology. We will return to our speaker in a minute for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate your questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Radio broadcasts of the City Club are made possible through the generous support of Case Western Reserve University. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ PBS IdeaStream and Time Warner Cable. Television broadcasts are supported by National City, now a part of PNC, and Cleveland State University. Closed captioning is supported by Nordson Corporation. Our live webcasts are supported by the University of Akron. Also today, we are pleased to welcome guests at tables hosted by the Asian Indian American Community, Case Western Reserve University, Centric Consulting, Hatch, Medical Mutual, Mocha Cleveland, Moreno Ventures, One Community, Thai Ohio, and University Hospitals. The City Club would like to thank our generous sponsor, One Community, for its support and assistance with today's forum in bringing Mr. Chopra to Cleveland. With us today is Mark Ansbury of One Community. Mr. Ansbury, will you please stand and be recognized? We also wish to thank Lev Ganik of Case Western Reserve University for helping bring Mr. Chopra today. Lev, would you also please stand and be recognized? Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks again to One Community. Now, we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Assistant Director of Development, Marcella Brown, and Education and Outreach Coordinator, Deborah Agasti. Now, first question, please.
Mr. Chopra, you spoke about the vital importance in daily American life to computers and technology. Probably there are millions of Americans who just cannot afford the cost of providing the service for computers or initial purchase of computers. Does the Obama administration have any plans to make available to those who cannot afford what you call the necessities of life, to those people?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to answer it in two parts. The first part is the traditional policy response, which is we have grant programs that are released today. In fact, I'm assuming a number of you will compete for these programs through our Broadband Technology Opportunities Program to facilitate grants for the provisioning of public computer centers to help bridge some of that digital divide. You will find at state and local levels and nonprofit levels an ecosystem of folks working to bring about strategies to lower the digital divide. But I would be remiss if I answered you by laundry listing those programs. The real answer is we must decouple the computer from what I'm describing as the networked capacity. Well, some refer to this as the Internet of Things. That might be the easiest way of thinking about it. We may have a $5 device that's network enabled that can take your pulse, I don't know, maybe more than $5, but we'll come up with something. That has the ability of providing a valuable service to you without you thinking of it as technology. I believe Nike shoes have a sensor that connects to your iPod for purposes of your tracking your performance. So a sneaker, in a sense, is now a networked device. When we marry ideas to relevance, I see this new platform of innovation where people are going to be thinking about what are the creative devices or software pieces that run in other contexts that will help me solve a need to make my life better. In the first era, it was tied to the PC, and all the innovation happened in that box. We are way beyond that moment, and my hope is that you'll find price points all across the spectrum to meet your needs. Yes, sir.
Question for you is this. You talked about the United States lag behind in far as education, far as 2 years and 4 years degrees amongst people. Question is two parts. You was technical czar, if you will, for the state of Virginia, and you're technical czar, if you will, for the United States. What are some of your recommendations far as like currently training people, but also going to retraining people far as who's been displaced, far as taking advantage of this technology?
This is an area of great passion of mine. So forgive me if I take a little bit longer than this question, just briefly, because I think it's critical. Generally speaking, I see three ways in which technology and innovation will address our workforce needs from a traditional K-12 environment and beyond. Number one, what are we actually teaching? I'm going to come back to these in a minute, but what do we teach? The second pillar is the method by which we teach. And then the third pillar is basically how do we facilitate the sharing of best practices to create an ecosystem of better teaching. Now let's talk about this framework in the context of the question you asked. We have an educational attainment challenge, but we also have a very real problem. How do you convert, in my case in Virginia, the 1 million high school dropouts who live amongst us? We have programs to get your GED. We have funding available through workforce training. There's probably about 15 federally funded, state-administered, locally delivered programs that all try to grapple with this question. I tried to tackle this in the 90-day, what can you turn on quickly way? Idea number one, I went to the local cable companies. In my case, it was Comcast and Cox. And I said, look, you have all this on demand. Could you take the GED curriculum, which the PBS station in Kentucky has made tapes that are available? Could you just load them on your on-demand system for free? They said, no one's asked. Pretty simple. 5 months into this, 6,000 classes had been downloaded. I mean, you know, the whole thing, you start, what? No effort. I said, okay, we're making progress. What's the next thing? So then we said, now we have to go after the what you, so that was the how, the method by which you learn. Then the question is, what do you teach? Here, the problem was, we have not married the ideas, call that the GED, with relevance. How do we work successfully in this technology-empowered world? So we launched something which we've jokingly, it's called Plugged In. Plug GED in. And what we challenged, we said, look, the governor has this venture capital fund for innovation for public sector, $3 million fund. We set aside about $150,000 to spur the following contest. Could you marry an accelerated GED curriculum with an IT certificate program that Microsoft has called the Microsoft IT Academy, with a contextualization program that means these folks actually have to produce a software or something. And do it all in 6 months with the bold proposition that we're going to take a high school dropout to a technology job 6 months. We conceived of the idea in the fall of 2008, enrolled our first students in February of 2009. They graduate in July. Northrop Grumman has promised all graduates entry-level job interviews, and we have high confidence that they're going to get a position. It's ideas and relevance on that modest pool of the market. But it's also thinking about the digital world in which we live. We went to the, again, 6 to 9 month kind of time frame, less than that. We went to the, and I'll say just two more things and I'll be quiet. Oh my goodness, the kids who fail 6th grade algebra are kind of in a tough lot going forward. It turns out the data, at least in Virginia, I don't know what the Ohio data would show, shows that if 68% of the kids passed 6th grade algebra, pre-algebra, forgive me. So we had to get to 8, we want to get to 80, 85, 90%. So 68 was a bit of an anomaly for us when we were doing reasonably well on a number of indicators. Traditional response is put money to a program to enroll, remedial education, training. We said, wait a minute. A lot of kids are buying these kind of devices. I said, I have no money. Well, we found 5,000. We have 5,000 bucks. We said, we're going to issue a challenge. We had the math specialists in our schools tell us exactly what it is that kids are messing up. Fractions, proportions, that kind of a thing. And we said to the broad developer community, we got no money, but we want to celebrate you. Would you please develop an app that's free that we could test out to see whether or not kids can learn the proportions and fractions problem? And on June 30th, we announced the winner of it was this little random guy, no company, no business, just a guy, got the $5,000 check. It's this Numberline program, which I actually play. It's really cool. I'm reminded of all the things to learn in my, you keep my math fresh. My point is, we can take advantage of the how to teach and the what to teach. My last comment about the what to teach. There's a term you're going to hear a lot of, and that's the term called STEM, STEM education. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we presume that that represents a K-12 vision. We need to get kids in the pipeline. Well, folks, we really don't have a STEM curriculum in this country. We have a SM and an ET. The science and math, reasonably well regulated, reasonably well tested, reasonably well understood. The ET, I like to think of that as the wild, wild west, an opportunity for innovation. So in Virginia, Governor Kane said, for a modest amount of money, $500,000, we're going to challenge every school district to come up with an ET program. So auto mechanics who learn computer software, because there's more software. Lev was telling me in his car, he's got a computer chip to upgrade the system to run his car. It's all computerized. So the what to teach in the ET could be very appealing to the folks who don't necessarily want to understand the theory behind why a derivative is as it is calculated. So we don't want to lose those people. And the ET challenge was to get schools all across Virginia to try to inspire new curricula, new projects, new things. And ultimately, we want to have a platform to study all this so that we can measure what works, which ties me into the president's agenda, the $5 billion Race to the Top program, which we hope will be a platform for identifying what works in our educational system and to ensure the rapid deployment of best practices so we close the gaps you're talking about. You don't need a master's and PhD or whatever in physics in order to get the basics in to be a technician who can understand advanced manufacturing. But we do want to get you early so that you can expose yourself to that capacity and be successful in this economy. And as we upskill our workforce, we'll see a resurgence in our long-term economic growth. Sorry for that long-winded one on that, but it's a passion of mine. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chopra, as you know, in the history, there's a rise and fall of all civilizations. We now seem to be at the apex of technology and economics. How long do you think we'll be there, and who do you think will displace us?
Well, we have the capacity to continuously improve our performance because what we do well is bring ideas to life. Isn't that the tagline of one of our companies? What this country does very, very well is we build an ecosystem and a culture of entrepreneurship. I may say that our educational attainment rate is lacking, and that is a component. But when you want to assemble the iPod, you take the parts from all over the world and you put them together in the iPod. It's Silicon Valley that attracts the lion's share of the margin in that product. I'm getting a little bit technical, but the devices might be the components might be manufactured, the systems engineering might be here and there, but it's our country that has the DNA that brings them together into a product that adds value. It's what my mentor says is ideas meeting relevance. We do that very well. The reason I have high hopes for our country is we're starting to get it amongst our companies that are globally competitive. What you're starting to see, now, first phase was obviously a challenge in our country, which is that there were jobs moved overseas, and we obviously are grappling with this economic reality. Very difficult question. But what we're starting to see is the following. Companies are now thinking about building products and services in a global market, designed for the global market, that could be brought back to this country to add even more value. What does it mean that while we're struggling in the auto industry, that less than 3 months after the Mumbai terrorist attacks, the CEO of Tata announced the world's cheapest car in the exact lobby where they had been attacked during that horrific exchange? Our globally competitive companies are starting to figure out that they can build world-class defibrillators at low cost in Asia, designed with all the criteria and challenges of that market, and can bring that learning back here to have a whole new platform for growth. So I see tremendous opportunity as we look to take our learnings from around the world and to find ways to marry them up, A and B coming together. I'll make one down the street from where Mario had set up his original kind of entrepreneurship center. We have a $500 million research center that the Howard Hughes folks put up to focus on some real difficult problems. Why did they locate it where they did? 7 miles north of Dulles Airport, which is an international. They want to bring the world's best minds to this country, put them into a really cool location, bring physicists, psychologists, mathematicians, and poets together to say, how can you assemble something that didn't exist before? That's what's in our DNA, and that's what gives me great hope that we're actually on a new growth curve if we get this right.
Mr. Chopra, Mike Anderson from University Hospitals. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Back to your Big Mac and fries example, and I hope your wife's not listening to this part of the podcast, too. Healthcare reform is here. The goals are the right ones. Follow patients longitudinally,
Yes, sir.
use the electronic health record,
Yes, sir.
decrease costs and improve care. But your example of the Big Mac and fries, how can we as healthcare organizations and you and the federal government give more power to patients to take ownership for their own health?
I think this is the real secret sauce in the debate. Oh, that's wrong. I didn't mean that. Woohoo! You like that? Putting it another way. Our public policy has historically thought of technology as a noun. What President Obama has challenged us to do is to think of technology as a verb. It's not because we want the box on the desk in the doctor's office that we do this. It's because we want the information that is gathered in that format or any other format, like we were describing earlier, that gentleman asked about digital divide, to deliver a valuable outcome. This is the marriage of leadership with the platform. So in Virginia, where we came from, we have an outcomes-based management system that is public-private partnership called the Council on Virginia's Future. Don't tell us our healthcare system is measured by dollars spent per whatever. Tell us what the obesity rate is in our country, in the Commonwealth. Tell us what our infant mortality rate is. When you set the outcome goal, which is to, in our case in Virginia, we're going to focus on infant mortality. Now you unleash, that's the relevance. Now you unleash the power of ideas on the platform. I don't really expect the hospital administration to really think about this. That's not, no offense, that's just not what you wake up in the morning and go to bed at night doing. You have to run a very efficient operation. There are a lot of folks in this room who have creative minds that represent the brand industry or someone who's got the left brain, right brain stuff figured out. They'll hear the call for infant mortality reduction. You'll make them aware, Dr. Harris will, that this is the data we can make available. Can anybody mash up the data with other valuable thoughts to advance the reduction goals that we're setting? And you'll come up with strategies we'd never even heard of. You wouldn't think of them as health IT or whatever. They're not going to be in a clean little noun. But I want us to have that culture of rapid-fire innovation on the outcomes goals. That's what the president's asking us to do. That's what we must do. That's why we're trying to say, let's get the platform ready. I'll make this final comment on this. It troubles me that in every retailer in America, they have enough data that if the Browns lost on Sunday, it's raining on Monday, and you're hanging with the guys thinking about going to a happy hour, they know exactly what promotion to run to get you to buy a plasma TV that afternoon. That's the kind of analytical power we have in the nation's retailing sector. Or to upsell me the Oreo from the basic thing when I buy my milk at the same time. Think of that in the healthcare context. Whether it be on what I eat, the dietary side, or what we do in terms of choosing an intervention, whether surgery or a stent may be the better alternative. We don't have that kind of infrastructure to study what works globally or nationally. That's part of what we're trying to figure out, and that's why we're pushing so hard on getting us to wire up the nation's healthcare system, as an example. Same is true for education. By the way, any of you that are educators in the room, tell me this. Do we test the marginal value of that little app? If this thing actually delivered outcomes, would we know it? Do any of our databases track the content that we put in front of our kids? We could tell you if the teacher's considered good or bad. We have a lot of public policy attention on that issue. But what about the content that we actually put in front of the kids? If we assemble these 5 or 6 different chapters and present them in a certain format, the data in retailing compared to things that are relevant to policy, it's sad, and we are going to fix it. We have to. Yes, sir.
I believe in Congress right now. They're about to establish the National Center for Research in Advanced Information and Digital Technologies. And I was wondering what your hopes and expectations are for that new entity and what your thoughts are about it.
I actually don't know that acronym, but we have lots of those. In my domain, I have the National Information Technology R&D Collaborative, NITR-D we call it. We have lots of these. I am generally of the opinion as follows. Our country has to remain competitive by investing in the building blocks of innovation. That means our commitment to research and development has to be strong. Where we don't want to prescribe what the researchers study, let their minds run. We can write broad themes, which are priorities that a deliverable out of my office on behalf of the president is essentially a document calling for budget guidance to the agencies on how their technology R&D activity is funded. So that's sort of the channel by which we try to make broad themes into where we should focus on the basic research and development blocks. And I think putting more money into that is frankly what the president's called for. He's called for what the America Competes Act called for, which is to double core funding for basic R&D, and we're on path to do that because of the stimulus package. But we also acknowledge that in these questions, if you were to think about, we're talking about healthcare with the 2 hospitals, when a patient needs to go online to pull his or her information, you need to authenticate that they are who they say they are. Any bankers in the room? If you want to do banking e-commerce, I think you have a similar problem. So you can go down the list of the relevance and say, what are the areas in which, gosh, there's some building blocks that would help us. I really don't think Dr. Harris should spend a lot of his capital solving the patient authentication problem, although you're welcome to do it. Because that's the challenge that we share as a collaboration, a community. So if we could find a way to marry, there's some advanced technologies that we don't quite know would do what we're trying to do here, that are maybe a further couple, maybe 3 to 5, 10 years ahead. So I think we have enough policy levers to answer the question. It's about leadership and a commitment to do that kind of matchmaking. So I don't know if a particular center focused on some narrow scope is going to solve any particular challenge, but I do want to solve the patient authentication issue and others like it in a secure way so that we can avoid identity theft and all the risks of the attacks that we're facing in this country on a daily basis from cyber threats and so forth. Yes, ma'am.
Right over here.
Oh, sorry, that's not my job to point, forgive me.
WVIZ, the public broadcast system that serves our region, is
Yes, sir.
truly one of the most innovative providers of technology and concomitant resources for both the general public and for education.
Yes.
Regretfully, in the previous administration, we saw, a tremendous erosion of support for PBS throughout the country.
Yes, sir.
What is being done now to restore some of that most needed support that's reaching such a large segment of our community?
My area of focus on this, I served on the Public Broadcasting Board in the Commonwealth that related to the oversight of the various PBS stations. You must have a similar thing in Ohio. So my challenge was to take the world as it is today. I'm happy to be supportive of debates on where budgets should go. But in the world as it is today, we asked the following question. We went through this remarkable change in this country, and by the way, you've not heard a peep about it since. DTV, our transition to digital television. If we didn't have all the other problems in this country, could you imagine? In one fell swoop, we went from like 50 years of one way of living our lives to a completely new way, and what? Not a peep. I'm impressed. But you retained spectrum. Like most PBS stations are, you've got spectrum. What a powerful asset spectrum is. The auctions that were run to basically repurpose the spectrum that was freed up generated $19 billion of value when we resold them on the open market for a new generation of wireless internet services. Well, you retain some of that spectrum in your community. I don't know how you monetize it, but it would be interesting. What was that Fund of the Future thing you were talking about? Oh, I was loving this thing. What's it, the new Northeast Ohio Fund of the Future? They're having an online competition for creative ideas for shared services on government efficiency. Very cool, taking it back to Washington. Imagine a contest. Who can monetize the excess spectrum in the PBS market to generate economic value that will restore I'm making it up, but that spirit. That's the kind of thing I think my office is trying to help spur. I can't solve the budget gap. Someone's ringing something. What does that mean? That's it? Last question? Not my job. Oh, sad.
I guess it is over. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Today at the City Club of Cleveland Forum, we have been listening to Aneesh Chopra, United States Chief Technology Officer. Thank you, Mr. Chopra. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Since 1845, National City has opened doors to opportunity and success for Cleveland and Northeast Ohio. Caring about doing what's right for our customers is part of our heritage. This City Club Forum broadcast is made possible in part by National City.